Welcome to the Kriya Yoga Podcast, a source of inspiration and actionable education for those inspired towards the goal of enlightenment through yogic meditation. Through these interviews, discussions, and reflections, it is my intention to share the possibility of waking up to the reality of self and God realization, and to remind you of the immortal words of Paramahansa Yogananda. Don't look back. Don't look to the left or to the right. Look straight ahead to the goal and go all the way in this lifetime. I'm Ryan Kurczak, and I'll be your host on this adventure of spiritual self-discovery. This is why love is one of the most important parts of the whole practice. Because the choice that you have in every moment is to manifest an experience of love. That's a choice that you have. I don't care what's going on in your life. You might not be able to control the external situations, but you can control your internal response to it. Okay? And I was debating whether to talk about this, but why not? Let's get into it. So, how many of you were raised Catholic? Anyone? Great. Excellent. I was raised Catholic too. How many of you heard about that idea of original sin? Yeah? How many of you don't like that idea? Okay. Well, that's what we're going to talk about. Okay. In the yogic model of creation, which really is not just a model, you can really kind of see it in many different religions and philosophies, the beginning of all things is spirit. Infinite, light, spirit, timelessness, eternal. And then we have creation starting to happen. And in the yogic idea of things, it's Om. And from Om, we start to get the elements. And by elements, I don't mean like iron and oxygen and so on. I mean, in a sense, for lack of a better word, the idea of an element. So there's a subtle evolution that occurs. And in order for there to be this subtle element, there has to be the capacity for you to sense things, for you to touch things, for you to feel things, for you to hear things. So in this whole explosion of consciousness, in a way, not only are there like the blueprint of the elements coming about, but there's also the ability to hear and see and taste things. And that's not like your ears or your nose. That's consciousness's ability to perceive things. So it's very subtle. Eventually that keeps going, and once there are things that you can kind of see and perceive, then there has to be stuff that you can actually touch and feel and move about, right? So right now you're sitting on a chair. You can smell how there was incense burnt earlier. You can see the light of the candles. You can hear my voice. You can feel the air on your skin. Okay, well, that's physical. Well, what part of you, what's going on when you dream? When you touch a dream rock, are you actually touching like the elements, the physical elements of that rock? No. When you smell a scent in the dream, I pulled up last night, I don't know why I did this, I pulled up whale songs. And I had it on my phone, and I thought we would go to sleep listening to whale songs. I'm not sure why I did that, but I thought it would be neat. And so I had 8 hours of whale songs going on, and about 3 a.m, I had a dream that Jasmine said, that Jasmine was talking to the whales, and she said, "Quit talking to me, I'm trying to go to sleep." Right? So I reached over and I turned off the whale songs. She didn't actually do that. She didn't actually wake up. But in my dream world, there was something like Jasmine speaking, and there were whales that I heard talking. But were that actually whale songs? Was that actually Jasmine? So on. So there's a world of experience that exists when you are not aware of this physical thing. So you've got eternal, infinite consciousness, God, Ishvara, and then you have the subtle world, and then you have the physical world. Now this is an extreme oversimplification, but just roll with me. Now here's the neat thing about it. Here's the infinite, eternal, true, always existent, right? Well, this exists whether the physical exists or not. All right. Then we have in here the astral causal realm, subtle realm. This astral causal subtle realm, this exists whether the physical exists or not. Okay? And that also means that the infinite exists whether the subtle exists or not. So we start out with infinite, eternal, incomprehensible, but that which we are, which we can learn to experience through the practices of Kriya Yoga. We go into the subtle, we go into the physical. Now, the whole reason we're here is because we have a desire. You have a physical body because there is some part of you that has a desire that can only be fulfilled by having a physical body. Okay? If you did not have a desire to have something physical, you wouldn't have a physical body. You would be just here in the astral causal realms. If you did not have a desire that could be filled in the dream realms and so on, you would not have that body either. You would simply abide as spirit because you would have no desires. You would be content. You understand what I'm getting at here? Okay, so you see, you have to have an original sin, which is desire, to be born into this world. So it's not, it's not how they make it out to be, where you need to repent. Well, you do actually need to repent, but not in the way they do in Catholicism. So part of the process of yoga, as Sri Yukteswar put it in his book, The Holy Science, is to repent. And to repent simply means to start letting go of these desires. To let go of these desires. And the way you do that is first by becoming focused and know why and why you are wanting to practice and how to do it well. That's the first step. Once you have that in your mind and consciousness, which we're going to go over this week, then you can practice and you start catching glimpses of subtler experiences of yourself. Meaning, when you meditate in such a way that you become free of the body, well, then you feel almost enlightened, because if all you know is the bones and the flesh and having to eat and all these kinds of things, the moment you have freedom from it, that feels like a profound spiritual experience, which it is, but it's not the spiritual experience. And many people kind of get confused with that. The more you go into this, then you are able to abide in this more clear, light, buoyant state that becomes natural for you. And you can do that while you're in a body too. Well, eventually you become comfortable there, and then you need to keep going. You need to wonder, okay, well, what is beyond all this fun stuff, that I see going on in my consciousness, all these beautiful visions of angels and divine beings and so on. That's just a stage. It's a very wonderful stage, but you have to go beyond that as well, because that is also a definition. So essentially the whole purpose of this process is to reverse the flow of your consciousness. That's what's going on here. Up until this point, you've got a human body. Great, that's excellent. Now that you've got a human body, you now have the capacity to think, to feel, to reason, to channel your devotion to go in the other direction, so that you're not constantly beating your head against this world of change and wondering why it never gets any better and things just keep going wrong and I have this joy for a little while but then it goes away. That's just what it's like to be here. That's just the nature of things. But once you get a handle on that, then you can really start to dig in deep. In yogic literature, there's a phrase that essentially says, the yogi is meant to endure pleasure and pain, heat and cold, adversity and success, praise and blame. The yogi is meant to endure those things while seeking knowledge, right? While seeking the truth of your being. And so that's why, as a yogi, I'd like to encourage you to look at your life very different than other people. And I don't mean that to create more division and tribalism. That's not useful in any way. But just like, if I want to learn jazz music, I have to think about music very differently than, say, if I just want to learn punk rock. Okay, I have to think about it differently. It doesn't make the expression of it less valid for the people who follow those routes. But as a yogi, you're here deep down inside because something knows that you can't keep living the way you've been living. Or maybe you're here just because you need a boost, you need some more inspiration. But ultimately, yogis are approaching life very differently than other people. And that's only because we are all at a different space in infinite consciousness. We are all equal, we are all one, but in this model of consciousness, there are beings that are flowing down to become more involved in nature because they have desires that need to be fulfilled. And there are those that have hit that part of life where they see the change, they see, things just keep happening, I'm not fulfilled no matter how successful I am in all these different things, and they start to wonder about something else, and they start going the other direction, okay? So as a yogi, be aware that you need to think of life very differently, and you need to be very consistent about it. Because what a lot of people do, at least this is my experience, and I have to apologize, over the years I've become a little bit more of a fundamentalist in my approach to yoga. I used to be like, oh yeah, whatever, eventually you'll figure it out. But I don't feel that way anymore. I think if you're going to do it, you should do it. What most people do is they say, oh, I want to quit smoking. Yeah, but I'll just have a cigarette on Fridays when I go out drinking with my buddies. And then next thing you know, they're smoking again, or they say, I'll quit once I turn 30 or 40 or 50 or whatever, and they never seem to quit. Right? If you're going to quit going through this cycle of suffering, just stop. Quit. Just knock it off. And that doesn't mean that there won't be momentum that you still have to work through. But you have to decide for yourself, right now, I am done perpetuating this experience, which if I just step back and pay attention, it's the same stuff again and again and again, just a different way of experiencing it, right? Haven't you noticed that? How many of you have been successful in your jobs? Like really successful, you can really appreciate it, okay? Has that brought you the success that you really wanted? Maybe it allowed you to go to Costa Rica or the beach every now and then, but at the end of the day, do you feel deeply fulfilled? All right, let's imagine, even in your relationships and so on, how many of you have had loving relationships? You've been able to give love, you've been able to receive love. How many of you have had that, right? Most of you. Well, at the end of the day, that's great. But that still fulfill that little hole in your heart, that you have spiritually speaking? It helps because love creates more light, right? And light allows us to see spirit more clearly. But going back to what Sri Yukteswar was talking about with that biblical quote was, the issue is you've left your one true love, right? And you've tried to fill in that hole with all these other things. And so as a yogi, just decide that you are willing and ready to do your best. And you're going to fail a lot, but you're going to still do your best to keep moving in that direction. And you're going to be honest with yourself about it. Using the idea of smoking, for example. You might quit, and maybe one day your world just completely goes to shit. And so you have a cigarette. All right, that's not a failure. That's not you saying well, maybe I'll quit. That's just an experience where it happened and you ended up kind of backsliding a little bit. You'll get over that, you'll move on, you'll feel better, it won't happen again, right? When it comes to your spiritual practice, you're going to do your best. And every now and then, your desires are going to come back in and they're going to pull you back into things that you necessarily don't need to be involved in. But you have to just simply maintain the awareness of what's happening. That's the key. If it pulls you back into stuff, it's okay, observe it. Say, well, the tidal wave came in and it washed me out, but what do? You swim back to shore as fast as you can. Okay, and you keep doing that until eventually you become such a strong swimmer that nothing pulls you back out. What I really wanted to get out with this talk was the Yamas and Niyamas of yoga. The Yamas and Niyamas, these are the first two limbs. These are the first two limbs. We have Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. And the whole purpose of yoga is to move you to a place where you are able to experience Samadhi. That's the point. That's the apex of the triangle. Okay. And Samadhi is a state of oneness. Samadhi is a state of clarity. Samadhi is the direct, absolute realization that You are the self, you are infinite, you are eternal, you are no longer overcome or bound by the ever-changing nature of Prakriti and so on. You are the one infinite, you are one with Ishvara, you are surrendered in God and so on. This is the apex. This is why we are doing what we are doing. But in order to build that pyramid, you have to have the right foundation. And the right foundation are the Yamas and Niyamas. Now, in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, I believe it begins on verse 28 of chapter 2. Patanjali tells you what they are. So non-violence or harmlessness, truth, truthfulness, non-stealing, conservation of vital forces, or celibacy. And by celibacy, we'll talk about that. It means directing all of your energy and your attention to your purpose. Right? Non-possessiveness, these are the Yamas, the universal disciplines. Now, we also have the internal disciplines. Purity, contentment, intensity in spiritual practice, practice of mantras, and alignment of attention with the eternal self or surrender to God. These are the internal disciplines. Now, what Patanjali says right in the middle of those two things is that these disciplines, what we've just talked about, they're applicable irrespective of one's state of life, place, time, or circumstance. Which means you don't ever not do them, no matter what's going on, no matter who's around, no matter what the state of the country is in, no matter whether aliens are invading or not. You are harmless. You practice truthfulness. You don't steal. You conserve your vital resources. You don't become engaged in possessiveness. You practice purity, contentment. You engage in your spiritual practice. You align your attention with Ishvara. You do this as often as you are able, and you don't make excuses for yourself. This is called the Mahavrata, or the Great Vow. Now, as a Kriya Yogi, for your practices to work in the way that we imagine and know that Paramahansa Yogananda, Sri Yukteswar, and so on, the only way that you will be able to experience truly what they describe is if you do these things. If you do not do these things, you'll have some fleeting experiences. Things will come and they will go. You will feel a little bit better about yourself, but you will not actually truly be able to know what is true of you unless you do these things. Now, I talk about this a lot in some classes online, but we have to remember that these are not moral imperatives. They're not the 10 Commandments. We're not telling you to do these to stop you from experiencing sin in the way we know it in Catholicism and so on. These are ways of being that when you engage them in your life becomes brighter. Your life becomes clearer. And when your life becomes brighter and clearer, you are able to perceive, feel, experience that you are one with divinity. If you need some inspiration, look at your life and simply ask yourself, what can I do today that's going to cause a little less harm to the world? Right? Now, even let's imagine that you're a significant meat eater. Just eat one less hamburger. Okay? If you eat one less hamburger, that night you can stop and you can say, I didn't contribute as much pain to the world. And eventually, as it goes on and you're able to adjust your diet more and more, it becomes more and more harmless. You can stop and every night just say to yourself, I didn't kill anything today. I didn't, you might have run over a bug, but what you mean is I didn't actively choose to do something to take something's life, right? And you might find that beautifully, when you reflect upon that, you feel a sense of, just a slight sense of upliftment, right? Because you are admitting that you are engaging in this practice of harmlessness. Now, we don't want to be fanatics. I mean, some people do need to have certain diets in order to be healthy and to live and so on. But you want to do the least amount of harm possible. And if you can reflect upon that at the end of every day, you are naturally going to feel lighter. You are naturally going to feel clearer. You are naturally going to feel more enthusiastic because you know that your life is becoming more beneficial to the world. When it comes to truth, now there's two ways that you can approach truth. Going with the story that I just mentioned, you do have to have your own integrity. meaning you have to know what you are about. And you have to be that without compromise, but also, again, without hurting other people. All right? And that means that if you are being who you are and you're not being malicious about it, that's okay. So in the situation I was giving you, if I came in there and I was like, son, you don't know who you're talking to. You've only been doing this 2 years. Why don't you listen to me? And I'm going to put him in his place. That would have been a malicious way of me approaching that experience. That would not be harmless, right? But if I said to him, look, I've been doing this a while. I've written books on this subject. Like, we can talk about something else. That would have been a way of me not being malicious for me to remain true to myself. And I would have not had a day and a half of struggling with the fact that I was not being truthful. And this is also the difficulty is the more you become involved in this process, the more sensitive you become to this whole thing. Meaning the littlest little lie that you tell, it's going to hurt you and you're going to feel it. And so you're not going to want to do those things so much anymore. But the other way of approaching truthfulness, a very simple way, is just don't lie. Just don't lie, right? That's it. Which means you don't have to say anything. Just be quiet. And if you're able to engage that, what you're going to find is, again, at the end of the day, if you can think back and review, how did you used to live? How did you used to tell this little white lie? Or how did you kind of bend an experience to fit your ideal? At the end of the day, the more you do that, the stronger you're going to feel, because you're going to know, wow, I survived this day by telling the truth. Because the reason we lie is because we're afraid. And telling the truth and being harmless, that creates fearlessness. And in order to be a yogi, you have to be fearless, right? So these two things, if you can wonder about them, if you can contemplate, how can I engage this? And don't beat yourself up for wherever you are. I mean, some people are compulsive liars, that's where they start, no big deal. But if you can just make a little change every day, what's going to happen is, internally, you're going to become stronger, you're going to become lighter, which means when you practice your Kriya Pranayama, when you start to feel within the spinal pathway, you are actually going to be able to feel it, because truth is reflected within your body. And if you are not used to being truthful, if you're not used to having integrity, you're not going to be able to feel your body. Why? Because lying hurts. That's why so many people don't have good body awareness, because they've been caught up in this whole experience. And once they start becoming more engaged in truthfulness, they can feel their body again. They can inhabit they can inhabit this temple of spirit again. And then eventually, when they start practicing Kriya Pranayama, oh, I do feel that current moving up through the spine. Oh, I can feel the energy within the chakras. Oh, I can become aware of inner light and so on. Because there isn't all this stuff kind of blocking it out, because you've just hurt yourself so much, or others have hurt you too, because others lie as well. But the more you get into truthfulness, the more sensitive you become to that spiritual energy within your body. And the more sensitive you become to that spiritual energy in your body, now you're not just stuck thinking that you're this meat suit, right? Now you can start to feel the astral and causal part of you. Remember that sort of model that we talked about? Well, now you can start to feel into the subtler realm of yourself. And once you start getting in that, then eventually you start to catch glimpses of the higher part of you. You start to experience samadhi through the practices of pranayama and meditation and so on. But in order to really deeply experience profound benefits of meditation, of pranayama and so on, you have to have the yamas and niyamas working. And the first two stages are to practice ahimsa, love, truth, and satya. Okay, that will take you further than just about anything else. And then it's as if your meditation practice becomes ignited. It becomes alive. How many of you do a lot of research on the internet about Kriya Yoga and things? Do we have any of those? Any Reddit people and all that stuff? Well, good. It's good to be informed about things, but when you start doing a deep dive into internet-based information, most people put an emphasis on technique. Well, are you breathing right? Are you contracting your throat just right? Have you sucked your belly in just right? And these kinds of things. Technique is really good, but in order for you to really experience the depth of this process, you have to do a full spectrum approach, which means start with the yamas and niyamas. In fact, Sri Yukteswar, in the Holy Science, he says you shouldn't even be meditating. You shouldn't even be doing asana until you've got the yamas and niyamas done, right? He says don't even bother with it until you have a handle on it. We're not going to be that fanatic or that fundamental, but I do think he's right. So as you're approaching this process, look at this week, look at today as a new beginning for you. And those of you who I've seen here often, look at it as a way of kind of restarting the process, because we can always start at a new level. So as you go through the week, as you listen to Swami talk and Isha Das when he's here and myself, realize we're going to be saying the same thing we've been saying for years. But you're going to be hearing it from a different level. And you want to wonder, how can I incorporate that into my life? What truths do you hear that stick out to you that you know you need to start cultivating, right? That's the important thing. Because I can talk, and each one of you is going to hear something different. And each one of you is going to hear something specific to you. And you're going to think I'm talking just to you, like I'm reading your mind. And I'm not. Mr. Davis had this effect too. I remember I would go to Center for Spiritual Awareness to be with him. And every single time I was there, I thought he must have read my mind and he must have been talking exactly to what I needed to know. And even when he would put out his truth journal, the quarterly newsletter, he would write these 9 months in advance. And I swear, every single time one of those truth journals came in the mail, it was as if I thought, he must have tuned into me when I was in meditation and wrote this article just for me. That's not what's going on here. It's that when we are in an environment like this, the big guru, the infinite guru, is working through each of us. And those who are speaking are going to say things that are going to be applicable. And each of you are going to pick up on those little bits of information, those little bits of truth that are specific to you. So pay attention. What jumps out at you? What kind of becomes clear in your mind? Write them down and reflect upon them as the week goes on. Because what you're receiving there is the specific information that you need right now at your current stage of growth, right? And once you get that under control, once you're skilled in that, then you can move on and new things will come to you. So again, as I mentioned earlier, this is a constant process of growth. Having practiced for 25 years, I'm still amazed at the new things that are kind of revealed. Things that if I tried to describe them to me 10 years ago, 15 years ago, even 5 years ago, I couldn't do it. Because the me that was there then wouldn't have the capacity to grasp the things that have come. So look at this whole process as though you are maturing, you are growing. Where you are right now is the most important, perfect stage. But don't cling to it, and be willing to wonder, what do I need to know now? What do I need to progress spiritually? What do I need to grow into this Kriya Yoga practice so that eventually I can catch these glimpses of light, these glimpses of samadhi, which will eventually lead me to being able to stay there, to go into meditation and experience it consistently. Because if you think that you're only lucky if you can experience samadhi or oneness, or if you think that it's like the fickle grace of God that gives it to you, that's not a way to think about it. Because you're going to be like a rat on a hamster wheel wondering when you're going to get your next little bit of food. Realize that this science of Kriya Yoga was put together in such a way that if you follow it step by step, stage by stage, you come to a place where you can repeatedly decide, okay, I'm going to sit and I'm going to meditate and I'm going to hear Om and I'm going to merge in it. And then you'll be able to say, okay, I'm going to go to that place where I'm free of my body, free of my mind, free of my thoughts, and I'm abiding as close as possible to this infinite spirit, and you will be able to just sit down and do it. It is meant to be like that.